the super crowd, where dreams take flight. Learn to invest like a pro, make your future bright. Impact investing, changing the game. Crowdfund the world, it'll never be the same. SuperCrowdHour, come join the ride. Change the world with us, we're on your side. SuperCrowdHour, come join the ride. Change the world with us, we're on your side.
To the Super Crowd Hour for March. I am so excited. I'm Devin Thorpe, your host, and today we're going to talk about why you should make money with Impact Crowdfunding. You know, there is a perception sometimes that Impact Crowdfunding, when you invest money for social impact, that somehow that can't make money or shouldn't make money, and it's something you do for charity. Nonsense. I'm going to tell you today why you can and should make money, because this is really important. We've got a couple of things I want to just cover quickly before we get started, though. We'll be talking about, 3 reasons that you should make money. And there are 3 compelling reasons why you should try to make money from this. And I believe you can make money from this as well. There's good evidence that you can. And I'll give you some tips to help you do that. I want to thank and acknowledge our producer, Chandan Saha. He does an amazing job. We couldn't run the show without him, and I'm grateful for him being here. I want to just, give you a little heads up that we are talking about money, talking about investing, but I am not offering you investment advice. I am here to give you some educational resources, some information, but you'll need to solicit financial advice from an advisor if you would like financial advice. That's not what I'm doing here today. I want to invite you to join the SuperCrowd community. You can, if you aren't already an official member, I invite you to join. Just scan this QR code or visit Superpowers for Good, number 4 in the middle, superpowersforgood.com. We would love to have you be a part of our community. You can join for free, and we would love to have you receive our newsletter and participate in some of our upcoming events, etc. If you have questions for me today, I invite you to submit them at 4sc.fund/question. You can just scan the QR code. I invite you to do that now. Plug that into your phone so that as you're watching today on television or elsewhere, you'll have the option to submit a question so that you don't miss out on the opportunity to have me answer the question you have. I know that today many of you are here because you are interested in how to raise money. And today we'll be talking about how to invest money. And those are very related, right? If when you're trying to raise money, no one is ready to invest, that's a problem. And so that's why we are excited to do content for both those who are raising capital and those who are investing capital. We want to expand the pool of both. We all win together. But today we're talking about how to invest money. But my book, Crowdfunding Made Simple, is a step-by-step guide to raising capital using AI tools. So I invite you to check that out. Scan the QR code or just visit 4sc.fund/CMS free to get that book absolutely for free as a download. I also have a book for those who are looking to invest. This is called How to Make Money with Impact Crowdfunding, and you can get this one free too. Visit 4sc.fund/ebook free. and you can get that book there. I want to thank our sponsors, and I've got a little bit of a message from our sponsors. Let me play that now.
Welcome to Cineblock, a film investing platform for the movie lovers, risk takers, and enterprising filmmakers. With a click of a button, anyone can now bankroll the hottest, up-and-coming films or shows as a real movie producer through investing at cineblockfilms.com.
We're grateful for the support we've received from Move the Needle with Rob Kaplan and Ridgecrest Herbals, a certified B Corp. We appreciate our co-hosts.
Prepare to be inspired by Devin Thorpe, a powerhouse in impact journalism and social good advocacy. This best-selling author hosts the acclaimed Superpowers for Good TV show featuring global changemakers like Bill Gates. With a readership of over 2 million, his 500-plus Forbes articles have shaped the dialogue on purpose-driven leadership and crowdfunding innovation. A sought-after speaker from the United Nations to Johnson & Johnson, Devin's unique blend of expertise as a former CFO and investment banker fuels his captivating presentations. Please welcome the dynamic and visionary Devin Thorpe, here to empower us all to harness our superpowers for good.
Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be able to share some information with you today. This is really a compelling topic. The reality is that what we're talking about, why you should make money, it seems like that shouldn't be controversial, but kind of it is for a variety of reasons. There are some who say it can't be done, right? That somehow, if we're going to have a social impact, our financial returns can't be good. Balderdash, poppycock, nonsense. It's not true. You can make a difference in the world, a significant difference in the world, and earn financial rewards. So let me just be very clear about that. It can be done. And I want to talk today primarily about the fact that it can be done and talk about how you can do it. So let me walk through a few details with you over the next hour or so. And we'll walk through and explain to you how you can and why you should make money with your impact investments via crowdfunding. Whoops, what have I done? I've started with the end. Here we go. So there are three primary reasons that you should make money, that it's good to make money from your impact investing via crowdfunding. Profits correlate with impact. We'll talk about that. That's an interesting one. I bet you hadn't thought about that before. Profits get recycled. That's interesting. We'll talk about that. Profits increase your allocation to impact. Wait a minute, what am I talking about? Okay, so I hope you're a little bit intrigued. We're going to talk about all three of those reasons in some detail. Now, Bill Gates is famous, or now infamous, or notorious, sadly, for his affairs, for his association with Jeffrey Epstein. But for many, many years, he was not only known as the richest man in the world, he was known as one of the world's great philanthropists. And it's interesting that, and I've had an opportunity to visit with him a couple of times, he assured me that he was focusing on maximizing his financial returns over the social impact of his investments. Now, that's a little bit, you could argue that that's a little bit disappointing, but I wanted to put that in here as a bit of a frame of reference, because whether he is now merely among the richest people in the world, he is clearly one of the most famous philanthropists on the planet, having created the Gates Foundation, to which he has given nearly $100 million of his own money, $100 billion. The Gates Foundation deploys billions of dollars every year. And so he's literally giving away his money, and yet he continues to focus zealously on financial returns. So what's going on there? That's an interesting correlation. I'm going to come back to that kind of at the end of my presentation, but I want you to be thinking about that. Why does he care about how much money he makes if he's just giving it away? You and I probably feel like we work harder for our money than Bill Gates. It's very unlikely that anyone listening today is a wealthier individual than Bill Gates. And so chances are good that you're feeling like you work hard for your money and you don't want to give it away willy-nilly. I think that's wise. I think that's right. So to the extent that you want to make money with your money as you save for retirement and save to do all the things that you need to do in this life, I feel like you should feel appropriate, right? If Bill Gates, big philanthropist, is still trying to maximize his financial returns personally and inside the foundation, then I think you and I can feel okay about wanting to have good financial returns for our investments. Okay, what have I done? So I apologize for my errors here. Let's talk about profits correlating with impact. This is not intuitive. But when you do a good job of impact investing, the more profit the company makes that you invest in, the more impact there should be. Now, there are times when this breaks down. I get that. But let me give you a simple example. I love investing in small businesses. I want you just to imagine for a moment a small business that's a food truck. And let's say that this food truck sells vegan food, right? Now, that may not be your jam. That may not be interesting to you, but there is unequivocal data that a vegan diet is more climate friendly. That's just a fact. A vegan diet is more friendly to the animals, right? No animals suffer because of vegans. That's just a fact. So now, and there's some data that suggests that a vegan diet is healthier. And so someone who sells vegan food may be supporting a healthier population. So there may be as many as 3 significant impacts resulting from people eating more vegan food. And you may support that by investing in a food truck that sells vegan food. So here's the trick. What is the correlation? How does profit correlate with impact? If the food truck goes out of business because it does not make a profit, it will no longer sell vegan food, and all of the impact that it was having goes away. So while there isn't a perfect one-to-one correlation between profit and impact, there is definitely a loose correlation between profit and impact, because if there is no profit, there is no impact. The company goes away. So I want you to see there that when you are doing your due diligence and screening for investments, it is important for the sake of impact that you also determine whether or not the business you are considering an investment in can ultimately generate a profit. It doesn't need to generate a profit today necessarily, right? Startups lose money. That's the pattern. That's one of the reasons they raise money, is so that they can spend the money they need to build a successful business. But if you can't see a path to profits, that business may not be ever able to deliver an impact. Okay. Reason 2 that you should make money from your impact investing via crowdfunding is that profits get recycled. Let me try and explain this. That what we're talking about is your profit, right? Let's say, for instance, that you loan $100 to the vegan food truck, and they pay you back over 3 years $125, right? So now you have more money and all of your money back. You can invest that money again. Now you could keep the $25, go out to dinner, get a vegan dinner of your own, and reinvest the $100 in a new project. Or you could reinvest the whole $125 and keep building your impact portfolio by reinvesting profitably. Either way, your profits are getting recycled, right? So that creates a perpetual, sort of infinite loop of social impact. So that is a really compelling reason. That's one of my favorite, well, I love all of these reasons, right, for making money. I just can't emphasize enough that when we don't seek to make money from our impact investments, we do put the whole program for ourselves really in jeopardy. It's essential that we make money. And this recycling of the profits is one of the key reasons. Now let's talk about the third reason. The third reason is that as we begin, this is something that happens over time, but as you begin to see financial rewards from your impact investments, you will begin to see that there may be an opportunity for you to invest even more money. Let's think about that. You might reasonably start by putting $100 into impact investments via crowdfunding 4 to 6 times a year. You may be following my work or others, and you may see from time to time investments that you want to make that you feel are compelling, that support a social impact that you care about, and where you see an opportunity to make money. And after you do that for several years, you may start to notice that things are going well. You know, I've invested in nearly 100 businesses, and very few have completely failed. I think out of nearly 100, we're talking about 2 or 3 that have just gone belly up. Interestingly, I had one portfolio company bought another portfolio company that was struggling, and so I actually had 2 investments in that one company in the end. That it's kind of an exciting thing to be following. I just love it. But you can as you begin to make more investments, you begin to see, wow, I can do this profitably. And then you begin to ask yourself, how does my return here compare to the returns I'm getting maybe in my 401k and my IRAs and other savings? And you may be able to move some of those assets. You might sell something that you collected. You might sell your RV and decide to put, that you're not going to use it anymore. You put that money to work. Maybe that money goes to work in crowdfund investments, your impact investments, instead of into something else, instead of being invested in a mutual fund or something. So you may, over time, see that it makes sense to increase your allocation to impact investing because you see it working. That is an exciting outcome that I get really excited when I think about that, because most of us with a little gray hair or who have lost our hair now have squirreled away some money for retirement, and that money usually sits in one way or another invested in the stock market or near it, maybe in bonds, in bond funds, but we'll typically invest in mutual funds, ETFs, and individual stocks in a brokerage account with Charles Schwab or something, and after we get our money out of the 401k. In any case, that's an opportunity now for you to begin moving some of that money potentially into impact investing via crowdfunding. So I think that is an exciting third reason for you to be seeking profits. If you're not diligently seeking profits on your investments, you'll never achieve that comfort, that desire to increase your allocation, because you'll just see, wow, well, I make these investments and they don't do very well. Well, yeah, if you're not looking for financial returns with your impact, you won't get financial returns with your impact. And then what happens is that you will, as a result, not ever reach this place where you're comfortable increasing your allocation to impact. Now, there's a little trick. For those who have a little more money, if you are in a position to move more than $100,000 in the direction of your impact crowdfunding, you can use a self-directed IRA. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. A self-directed IRA is not something you can even hold with Charles Schwab or Robinhood today. That just doesn't happen. They won't let you do this kind of an IRA with them. You have to move this to a special custodian. And so if you do a Google search for self-directed IRA custodian, you'll find that there are many dozens of them in the country. It's a tricky business. Your broker-dealers have ways of making money with your money that a custodian does not. So a custodian has to charge you a fee for every little thing you do. So if your transactions are too small, the fees will overwhelm the returns. So you've got to scrutinize the self-directed IRA companies that you consider, right? As you look at those custodians, you've got to scrutinize their fee schedules, make sure that they don't charge too much, make sure that they accommodate crowdfunding investments widely. Some will claim that they do, but what they really mean is they will let people invest in one or two platforms, but not others. That's a problem if you're like me and you want to invest across many platforms. I don't just invest in WeFunder or just in Climatize, or just in Honeycomb Credit, or just in Start Engine, or just in Republic, or just in Raise Green. I invest across many. So you need to be looking at all of those things. But if you can move your money because you have accumulated some real assets, perhaps you have some gray hair or have a good job, you could move your money out of your regular IRA into a self-directed IRA, avoid any, you can defer, or if you have the kind of IRA, what do you call them? The IRA where you don't ever pay tax, then you can do that. So you could avoid the current taxation for sure on your income generated this way. And so if you do a lot of lending, there may be, that is, if you like to make small business loans, I like to do that as one of my key strategies because I kind of know what to expect. And my experience is people tend to honor those commitments. And so I have a very profitable portfolio. But that income is taxable. And so if you have a substantial portfolio, you want to avoid the tax on that as much as you possibly can. So why make money? Making money allows you to do more good in the world. That's the bottom line, right? As you are making money from your impact investments, you can make more, do more good. You can give more to charity. You can actually make some strategic investments when you see an opportunity to do something that will have a huge social impact. For instance, you may see a nonprofit that's substantial, has lots of wherewithal and great programs that you support, and they may say, listen, we want to borrow money from our supporters at 1%. So we can buy an office instead of renting, and it will dramatically lower our cost of operating if we own a building over the long haul instead of renting. And so that'll allow us to do more good. And you would say, wow, I could support that and I could invest in that mortgage. And even though I'm only going to get 1%, I'm confident I'll get it back. It's real estate secured and all. So you might say, well, okay, I'm not really going to make money on that investment. I'm discounting my returns, but I can do that because I have a big portfolio now of investments that do make money. You might say, I'm going to just make a donation to charity because I feel more affluent because I've made successful investments and I want to do more good in the world. That's why Bill Gates wants to maximize his returns. He could just give away all of his money right now, but his view is, and you can argue whether or not it's the right view for one of the richest men in the world, but the fact is he is one of the most famous philanthropists on the planet, somewhat infamous now, but he has continued to seek to maximize his return so that he can maximize his impact. We can do the same thing. Now, I get lots of questions routinely about this kind of stuff, so I want to just walk through some of the frequent questions I get. I'm going to do kind of an FAQ here, a frequently asked questions, to give you a sense of how you can do this better, why you should do it. But the first question I get related to this is, how do I actually evaluate whether a deal is likely to be profitable? And there are two really related questions here. Can the business be profitable enough to deliver a potential return? And then the second question is, what are the deal terms? If the company is good and will be profitable and valuable, are the deal terms such that I can get a good return on my investment on a risk-adjusted basis for that deal. And that requires what we call due diligence. And there are lots of ways to borrow due diligence from other people, and we help with that a lot. So for instance, just last night we had a live pitch with 4 amazing companies pitching at the Superpowers for Good quarterly live pitch. And that was really a fun event. But what that gave us the opportunity to do was to have 4 quality companies who had been carefully screened to be on the program interface with very competent investor judges who asked really challenging questions of the founders to determine whether or not an investment in those companies would be a good and profitable investment. It seems to me that's a pretty darn good way for you to leverage the insight and power of someone else's research. You could layer on your own to determine if you're comfortable with their conclusions, but we even allowed anyone interested in investing to join a Zoom call where they could personally ask questions of the founders at the end of that program. So that session allowed people to leverage expert due diligence in making an investment decision. We publish a list of new offerings every week. My colleague Chandon publishes that list. Every Friday I publish my pick of the week. That pick of the week is available only to our paying subscribers, our Impact members of the Super Crowd, but that's only $5.95 a month. It gets you lots of perks. King's Crowd also sells due diligence research. So there are lots of ways to get quality research if you are interested in making better decisions. I've also done training in the past on due diligence. I will continue to do more in the future. So watch the SuperCrowdHour, both past and future events. And the past events are all available on the supercrowd.com. Go back and you can look for the events about impact investing due diligence. So you can learn more about how to evaluate whether a deal is profitable or not. So next question I get a lot. What are the biggest mistakes new impact crowdfunding investors make, and how can I avoid them? I think the biggest mistake I see is the tendency to get excited about a sexy deal with bad deal terms. So a sexy company that's raising capital using not investor-friendly deal terms. And I realize that there's a spectrum, right, of what's investor-friendly, what's founder-friendly, and impact investors sometimes should be thinking about making founder-friendly investments. That maybe should be our strategy at times. It's certainly part of mine. But I want to make sure that it's fair to everyone. I don't ever invest if I don't think the deal is fair to me, frankly. I want it to be fair to them. But let's say that you are an ordinary investor and an ordinary American, and your household income is not quite $100,000. And so you're being very cautious and very strategic with making small investments. Well, the CEO of many of the sexiest companies is a very well compensated guy and has the potential, or I say guy, most often it is a guy, could be a woman, thank heaven. And we have, as impact investors, an opportunity to support women. I seek that opportunity every week. But I encourage you to be thinking about this, really scrutinize those deal terms. Because if you are going to help make someone else rich, you should make sure that you are going to benefit from that investment, even if it aligns well with your social impact goals, right? Imagine a company that's got a new wind turbine technology, for instance. If you have good deal terms, you could invest in a technology that could really make a difference in our transition to a clean economy, a clean fossil fuel-free world where we rely on things like wind energy to power the grid. That would be great, right? Well, you don't want to impoverish yourself by making investments that make someone else rich along the way. You want to make sure that it's genuinely win-win. So that's the big investment challenge I see, is people investing in sexy businesses instead of scrutinizing the deal terms. You got to scrutinize those deal terms. Okay, how diversified should your impact crowdfunding portfolio be? Another really important question. It's hard to start out diversified appropriately, right? Because it takes time to make investments. If you were to try to build a diversified portfolio from all the offerings available today, you'd actually be a little bit challenged. If you screen out things that have bad deal terms, you screen out things with no social impact, maybe you're looking to support women founders or minority founders, by the time you parse the list down to the things that you really care about, you can't build a diverse portfolio right now today from the available options. There are hundreds of companies raising capital under Reg CF today, right now, this minute. So there are lots of options and quality options. In that mix, there are some great companies, like the 4 we had on the live pitch last night. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you could build an entire diverse portfolio, because you want to have about 12 to 20 investments as a minimum when you're done. So, and I like to think of myself as never being done, but rotating my capital through investments over the years. I want to maintain dozens of investments to make sure that no single investment can actually damage my portfolio return significantly if something goes wrong. It also means that with small investments, no single company, no matter how good the returns, will ever really make me rich. That's what you call investing instead of gambling. So you need to be well diversified, but you also need to take time getting there. Don't rush it. So you might realistically need 2 to 4 years to build a diversified crowdfunding portfolio. Give yourself that time and keep other capital invested and deployed in other ways so that you have some diversification overall in your investment portfolio. Now, what's a realistic return expectation? Boy, I tell you, let me give you some extreme examples of what I think is reasonable. I've invested in a number of solar project financing deals where I get high single-digit returns or low double-digit loan returns. So I'm just lending money secured by the project assets with a reputable company, typically at 8 to 12%. So that portfolio of my solar project financing probably has an average return of 9.5 or 10%, right in that area. And I've made something like 10 investments. Some have now been paid off fully. And so the capital is just being redeployed now. So that's one frame of reference. I recently made an investment in a pre-revenue, very early stage cancer drug. Now, I got in at a very early stage. The likelihood is, if I had to really be honest, I'd say the odds are most likely that I will get zero back from that investment. But if it goes well and all the moon and stars align, there's probably a 1 in 50 chance of getting a 1 in 100-fold return. If this company is successful, the founder, a great woman, could sell the business as she reaches milestones for 10 times, 100 times, perhaps even more than 100 times the valuation at which I invested. Wow. So that one is an interesting one. You know, what is my return on that? It's either zero, most likely, or it's 10 times or 100 times the amount of money I put in. So there's really a broad range of what you can expect. If you build a portfolio and you do thorough due diligence and you're scrutinizing deals using all of the tools available to you, including the AI tools that we make available to our members, I think you can expect to get stock market returns. And over the long haul, the stock market returns about 10%. So I think you can achieve that. Not financial advice. It certainly isn't guaranteed. As I mentioned, you can lose all of your money on any one of these investments. It's extraordinarily unlikely that if you're doing good due diligence, you would lose all of your money on all of your investments. That's almost inconceivable. But you're certainly not going to have all of your, it's also equally inconceivable that all of the investments you make will pay off. Right? Some are going to fail. That is the reality. So that addresses the next question, right? How risky are these investments compared to the stock market or real estate? Pretty similar. Pretty similar, right? You have to do the same kind of due diligence that you would make when you are investing in these kinds of instruments. If you delegate management of a stock portfolio to a fund manager or a collection of fund managers, that's great. You don't have to worry about it as much, but you also know from experience that those portfolios go up and down in value. In fact, the S&P dropped nearly 60% over 18 months back in 2000, from the peak in 2008 to the bottom in 2009. I mean, think about that. It's just a shocking reality that you could lose 50% of the value in your stock. It was more. It was almost 60% in the S&P 500. It was devastating to a lot of investors. Some really never recovered. So the stock market is risky. These investments are similarly risky. That's kind of my key point there, but could have the same kind of returns. I gave a great example of one of my, well, let me give you an example of one that has been paid off. I mentioned that I've invested in some project financings that paid off. I had another one that paid off. One of my early investments was in a U.S. company that operated primarily in Afghanistan for the purpose of employing women that have limited employment options, making delicious snacks grown in Afghanistan and sold in Europe and the United States. I've actually purchased the snacks. They are, in fact, delicious. I invested in a convertible note that entitled me to some equity if a financing occurred. That financing didn't occur, and the company at the end of when the convertible note matured, the company paid off the note in full, and so I got the principal and interest that had accrued on that convertible note, and I consider that quite a win. I think over the 18 months or 2 years that I held that, I made about a 20% return on my investment. Pretty good. I'm happy with that, especially knowing the impact that I was having at difficult time for women in Afghanistan. I made that investment right after the United States pulled out of Afghanistan abruptly and left the country in some mayhem. And so I was thrilled to see that investment pay off the way it did. Now, how do you balance your goals of impact with your financial discipline? That's challenging, but this is really important to do. Let me pause there on the FAQ to answer Amanda's question. She's asked, what role does due diligence play for everyday investors, and how deep should they go before investing? Well, I kind of talked about this a little bit already. Let me reiterate. Due diligence is vital. You have to do some due diligence. It's easy to get excited about the story of some of the companies share. That is not enough. You've got to look at what are the deal terms, and does the company have the potential, realistically, to make a profit and deliver an appropriate return. Now, you can leverage the wisdom and insight of other people. King's Crowd sells due diligence resources. You can get my pick of the week every Friday by subscribing to our newsletter. There are lots of ways to leverage other people's due diligence. Watching our live pitch is another way. So there are lots of ways to leverage what other people are saying and doing so that you don't have to rely on yourself and your own wisdom, especially when you're starting out. As you make more and more investments, you will learn to scrutinize deals better, and the quality of your due diligence will improve over time. Now, how do you balance your impact goals with your financial goals? That's a challenge. As I pointed out, it's actually rare that they conflict, but it isn't never. It isn't never. So if you find yourself in a situation, I'll give you the best example of when there's a tension. Honeycomb Credit does the best job of this of all, but occasionally one of the companies, one of the businesses, mostly small businesses, that borrows money from investors on the Honeycomb Credit website will struggle to pay it back. And when that happens, Honeycomb has developed a process to allow the investors to vote on outcomes. The company is invited to put forward a plan. Typically, that plan involves a hiatus of payments or a discounted payment for a period of time, and then a future time when payments will resume and ultimately complete, during which the interest may or may not accrue. It may not feel like it is in your financial interest to be gracious and generous in that situation. I tend to be biased toward the kind approach, the patient approach, especially if the interest will continue to accrue. Let's give the borrower time to get the business on better footing so that they can repay us. That's a great way to perpetuate the impact, be gracious, and demonstrate a different approach, a more impact-aligned approach to your investing. So let's see, I've got another question or two here in the FAQ. So what are the tax implications of crowdfunding investments, and how does that relate to the self-directed IRA? If you don't make your investments in a self-directed IRA, your impact investments via crowdfunding in a self-directed IRA, the returns, the financial returns, are taxable. Now, it sounds terrible, but let's be a little bit realistic. Let's say you built up over a period of time a $10,000 portfolio of impact investments made via crowdfunding. Let's say that half of those pay interest in current interest on which you would have to pay tax. So you have $5,000 earning interest, let's say at 10% to make the math easy, and it's also fairly representative of what you can earn. So if you had a 10% return on your assets of $5,000, that would be $500 of taxable income during the year. So you would pay tax if you're pretty affluent, you would pay a 24% tax on that $500, and that would mean that you paid a tax of, doing that in my head, $120. Now, if you're fairly affluent and you're being taxed at that rate, quite frankly, your tax bill for the year is going to be in the thousands of dollars. And that $120 is a rounding error. So you could build up a meaningful little portfolio and have very little tax implication. If we look at an equity investment, let's say we look at the drug company that I invested in, that I said it's pre-revenue, very early stage, and it will either pay out zero, probably, or it will pay out a lot relative to my investment down the road. Let's assume now for a minute that they go out of business. I get a letter in 18 months saying our drugs failed the early trials. There's nothing we can do. We're calling it a day. So I could then write off my $100 investment in that business and get a tax benefit against my other taxable income. Depending on how long I'd held that investment, it would be treated differently, long-term or short-term gain, but in any case, it would provide a tax benefit. I'm not your tax advisor either. I'm not an investment advisor, not a tax advisor, but this is helpful perspective. Finally, if it pays off big, let's say that 10 years down the road, I get 100 times the amount of money I put in. So I put in $100. I get 10,000 back. Well, that will be taxed as a long-term capital gain. If I were taxed at an ordinary tax rate of 24%, my capital gains tax rate would be 15% under current tax laws. So out of that $10,000, let's say there's a $10,000 gain just to make the math easy. Say I got 101 times my investment, so there's 100 times that, or $10,000 for this example, in the gain. I would pay $1,500 in tax, clear out 10 years in the future. Now, if that is a qualified small business, and I take advantage of the qualified small business tax credit, I could avoid that tax entirely, even though it's outside of an IRA. If it's inside an IRA, all of the gains in any of these are either deferred, or if you have a Roth IRA, that's the kind where you never pay tax, you would never pay any tax on the income. I would note, though, that if you are young and inclined to make equity-style investments, like in the pre-cancer drug, rather than in the loan kinds of investments to small businesses on honeycomb credit, that's great. There isn't nearly as compelling a reason to use an IRA for those investments, because the qualified small business tax credit and the natural deferral of equity returns provides for a scenario where you really don't have to worry about doing your investments in an IRA at all. So how do you find the best platforms or deals? Well, again, I like to say that, we help with that at the SuperCrowd. Chandon prepares a list every Monday of all of the new offerings. We've expanded our list recently so that we include every single new offering every Monday in a newsletter. You can subscribe to the newsletter and you can look at every single new offering. There are typically 10 to 30 new offerings every single week. So you can look at those. Every Friday, I give you my pick of the week so you can see what I like. We have also just began publishing our investment directory, where you can go on and you can look at not just the offerings that are available, but our due diligence on them. So that's open only to our Impact members, but if you want, you can access that. Kingscrowd also has a great database of all of the offerings that are live. You can go check that out at kingscrowd.com. So there are lots of great ways to find good deals that align with your investment strategies and your impact goals. At what point should you consider moving some of your assets this way? I would encourage you to do it sooner than later, but cautiously. You want to be able to feel like you have developed a strategy that is working. So if you are focused on making equity style investments that could take 5 or 10 years to mature, don't rush it. Don't rush it. Make small investments patiently over time and watch how you learn to scrutinize those deals and see if you don't begin to see that you are becoming more discerning, that you are less persuaded by the sexy and more persuaded by substance, right? And as you get more substantive in your analysis, you may get more comfortable in allocating more. If you're using debt, the average time it takes for a loan to mature is about 3 years. I've invested in lots of project financings that run on the order of 12 months. And I've made some loans that go 5 years and some that go a little longer. So, but 3 years would give you a real period of time to test your investment theory, your due diligence capacity, and you could begin to say, oh, yeah, this works for me. I can put more money to work this way. Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be with us. Again, I want to reiterate that you have the opportunity to join the SuperCrowd community. I invite you to become a member of the SuperCrowd. You can become a member for free. Visit superpowersforgood.com or s4g.biz, and you can join for free. Get the Impact member benefits for just $5.95 a month, where we will publish for you you'll get access to our investment directory and Devin's pick of the week every week. And the due diligence we're doing on all the new offerings every week. So lots of cool stuff. We invite you to join us. We'll be back next month with another conversation. We'll switch back next month to talking to entrepreneurs about how to raise more money effectively. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much for being here. We'll see you next month.